Picking the Alabama-Georgia game, especially lately, it's always a tough task because the margin for error is so small in this game due to the amount of talent on each roster and just how damn good both of these coaching staffs are. But somebody has to win. And this game most likely is going to come down to 3 to 5 plays. And with Georgia, many people are questioning their ability to stop the run after the performance against Kentucky, even though they're getting healthier in the front seven. But I don't worry as much about Kirby Smart's defense like I don't worry about Lincoln Riley or Steve Sarkisian's offense. He's going to have the best plan possible, him and Glenn Schumann, and they have the guys to sturdy it up and fix it. What does concern me about Georgia, though, is their lack of ability to be explosive offensively. The odds of them, even with all the talent they have, being able to methodically drive the ball down the field 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 plays or more and score a touchdown against Alabama or anybody worth their salt is pretty low. You need chunk plays in the run and pass game to be able to score enough to win a game like this. And I just haven't seen them really be able to do that yet. Now, could they in Tuscaloosa on Saturday? Yes, they could. But I've got to see it to believe it. Now, Alabama, on the other hand, has shown the ability to be explosive on offense due to Jalen Milroe's ability to run and throw well while moving. Alabama doesn't need Jalen to sit in the pocket all day and turn into something that he isn't. Move him around in the run game, get your Q counter, your power read, Q power, all that, and then let him create if the first couple of reads aren't there. The biggest question for Alabama in my mind is can they play clean in the penalty and turnover department, which we've only really seen them do once this year, and that was on the road at Wisconsin. If Alabama relapses back to making those mistakes, Georgia's got a pretty damn good chance to win this game. But I think Alabama plays clean enough, and they hit 3 of those 5 big plays to win. What's going to be another knockdown, drag-out matchup between these two Goliaths of college football. So give me the Crimson Tide, 27-20 in the first matchup between Kalen DeBoer and Kirby Smart. David Cone, former Michigan quarterback, my brother, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver. Reminder, quickly, we are going to be live streaming the Alabama-Georgia game from Innisfree, the bar right by the stadium. So if you're not going in the game, come out over there and hang out. We're going to be breaking it down, talking to you guys, having a good old jolly time either way. But David, when you look at this game, we've broken it down. We've talked about it all week. It's probably the biggest game of the college football season so far. Where are you leaning right now on who do you think comes out on top and why?
Well, I'll save my official pick, I guess, until we get to game day. Blaine and I were talking about that earlier. But I am really interested in the schematics of the game still. I think it's sort of unusual. I think for Georgia to beat Alabama, they need to do what we would usually tell other teams to do to be able to beat Georgia. I think they find themselves on the other end of this. I mean, just for instance, the Kentucky game, right? Kentucky won the time of possession against Georgia by 11 minutes. That's kind of surprising. Not only that, Kentucky won total yards. Kentucky won rushing yards. They won third down. They only lost turnovers, and that's one of the reasons that Georgia was able to win that game. And I say that because it seems like Georgia's best chance to win the game is when the other quarterback on the other team, Jalen Milroe, is on the sidelines, right? So keep him on the sidelines as much as possible. And I think the best way to do that is obviously Georgia having success in the run game and chewing a lot of clock. That's an area where you can win. I think that's an area where Alabama's defense has proven to be vulnerable. They gave up 200 yards of rushing to South Florida, 150 rushing yards to Wisconsin. Georgia can run the football. When Jalen Milroe is on the field for Alabama, that's where things get really interesting. I think you're going to see a lot of the same things that we saw in the SEC championship game that led to Georgia getting 4 sacks on Jalen Milroe. Now, they still lost the football game, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think you're going to see some of this rush 3 and spy 2 or possibly rush 4 but keep 1 spy, layered, like bringing pressure in a layered way. Georgia brought a lot of pressure against Kentucky, and Brock Vandagriff was able to escape the pocket and hit them for some big runs. If Brock Vandagriff's able to do it, you might as well go ahead and give Jalen Milroe 6. So I think they're going to be very multiple in the way that they're bringing this pressure in order to still get down linemen to Jalen Milroe, but not allowing him to escape on the outside. And again, like what I talked about in our preview is what kind of coverage are you then playing behind that? I think if you play a lot of man coverage against Jalen Milroe, he's just going to eat you alive. One, because that's the best that he is through the air, deep balls, vertical shots, and that's easier against man coverage. But then also if you turn your back, then he escapes out of the pocket. So I would expect a lot of these sort of like spy looks while bringing pressure and then zone pressure or zone coverage behind it.
Blaine, we always talk about winning the water cooler here on the show, and it's looking at, what's underneath just the obvious of, well, you need to run the ball well, you need to tackle well in space. Is there a part of you that thinks there's a chance, maybe in a game like this, with a quarterback like Jalen Milroe, that some people say, well, can he be a true NFL quarterback with his throwing ability, that he says, you know what, I'm going to prove tonight that I am an NFL passer, that I can sit in the pocket and dissect and just throw the check down and not just take off, which I think is the wrong way to go about it in this game. Is there any semblance of a worry in your mind that maybe Jalen Milroe is going to try and prove a point in this game instead of just doing what is not saying he's trying to lose the game or anything, but that they're not going to do what's in the best interest of the most efficient way for them to move the football, and that's using his strength, his legs.
I don't think so. I think the coaching staff, Jalen knows exactly who he is, and I think the coaching staff does a good job of putting him in winning situations and not trying to turn him into something that he's not. That would be Georgia's dream, right? Georgia's dream is to turn Jalen Milroe into a quarterback, a classic quarterback. If it's me, Jalen Milroe, you're going to have to go 10-plus plays. All right, you're going to have to go through progressions, and you're going to have to beat me that way. To me, I don't know if I heat up Jalen Milroe. I really don't. If it's me, I sit back, I'll bring 4. We'll see if we can get there with 4, but you can't get past Jalen Milroe. If you rush past Jalen Milroe, your life's going to be in trouble for 4 quarters, and I think Georgia's too well coached to do that. So I don't think there'll be a lot of blitzing in this game, especially with the weather, the way it's going to be. And another thing, I'll lean on the other side, and trust me, I've been very harsh on who Stetson Bennett was at Georgia. The one thing Stetson Bennett could do was make big plays at big moments. Sooner or later, Carson Beck is going to have to be the difference. Everybody before the year started was slated this guy as the number 1 quarterback coming out, the number 1 pick, and right now, in the Clemson game, I really wasn't impressed. He has to make big plays, and big plays especially on 3rd downs, making a guy miss in the backfield, making a really tough throw, because this Alabama defense...
And running when it's there, because Carson, he's not... he's not paraplegic. No, he can run, but it's not as explosive.
Yeah, and Stetson had great feel when it comes to that. And look, the more you look at this game, I'm not going to give up my pick right now. I think the weather's going to play a huge factor into this. I want to see what the weather's going to be like before the game starts. But it's tough because Georgia, you have to keep Jalen to be a true quarterback. If he beats you, he's got an update. If he beats you somewhere outside the pocket in his feet, it's going to be a long day. So I go with David. Schematically on defense for Georgia is what I'm interested in from a bringing pressure standpoint and actually sitting back in coverage.
And we want to know what you think in the chat, but I want to bounce this off you too, because obviously when you have a game like this at this point in the season, you don't have a humongous sample size, but we do know a couple things. We watched Georgia play Clemson, right? We've seen Alabama play a USF team that was pretty tough, and then Wisconsin. Say what you want about the quarterback position with Van Dyke going down, but we kind of know. What gives you more confidence, David? Watching the way that Georgia played against Clemson, or watching the way that Alabama played on the road at Wisconsin? Because I know Clemson's been blowing the scoreboard up against App State. We watched what they did against NC State. But I go back to my point offensively with Georgia. There still wasn't a lot of explosive plays. It was kind of just the dam just broke against Clemson. Meanwhile, Jalen Milroe's bombs over Baghdad against Wisconsin, and I know Clemson's better than Wisconsin. I'm not saying that, but again, I don't take a ton of solace if I'm a Georgia fan in the way we played offensively throughout that game against Clemson.
Well, I think the answer to your question is Georgia against Clemson. That win is looking better and better when we've seen how Clemson's looked on offense. The Appalachian State game, Appalachian State doesn't look that great this year, but to be able to piece it together multiple weeks and the way that they looked over NC State, which, look, Tennessee did the same thing to them. So we're getting larger sample sizes every single week. But still, I think that was a very impressive win. And yeah, Blaine tweeted at halftime, I'm not seeing a lot of separation on the outside by Georgia's wide receivers. They still ended up blowing out Clemson. I think that's a really good win. I also think, guys, it was important for Georgia to barely beat Kentucky the week before they go on a bye, the week before they go to Tuscaloosa. I mean, if there's anyone who's going to have a team dialed in after a performance like that, it's going to be Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs coming into Tuscaloosa. There was one other thing I wanted to say. I can't remember. Oh, the weather. I don't know if bad weather benefits one team over the other right now.
Do you think it would benefit Georgia more just because the bad weather? And I get it, it makes it harder for defenders too to run, but I think it makes quarterbacks a little bit more cognizant about taking off, and it kind of slows the game down.
Maybe.
The vertical ball is a little bit different.
But they didn't play well against Kentucky when it rained.
Yeah,
that was a game.
Well, I think I'm talking about that from the Alabama explosive play standpoint down the field in the vertical passing game, I think bad weather hurts that. I think it helps Georgia. I think bad weather slows down Jalen Milroe a little bit in the grand scheme of things and helps Georgia. So if I'm a Georgia fan, would I mind if it was raining pretty hard? I know, and Blaine's brought up this point that Georgia's thrown the ball a lot. They look like a throw to a run team. But I feel like the biggest advantage in this game is Alabama's offense against Georgia's defense, and the rain or bad weather or wind could kind of even that out to where it does turn into a methodical, field goals type game.
Which is why I said we're saying the same things about Georgia being able to beat Alabama that we usually say about teams trying to beat Georgia. Well, hope that the weather's ugly. Hope that you can control the football a long time to keep their offense on the side. Like, all of those things are what we usually say for South Carolina or Arkansas or Kentucky to be able to beat Georgia. I don't think it's that one-sided. Georgia's still favored as we wake up this morning.
That's another.
That's like everybody I've heard, everybody I listen to that's in the sports media world is picking Alabama to win this football game.
Does that scare you?
I just approach it with
caution.
caution.
I think J.D. Pickell picked Georgia.
I approach it with caution because, don't get confused about the Kentucky game. Go look the last 3 years. Georgia and Kentucky play weirdly close. Weirdly close. Georgia is running around with athletes, NFL players on this football team. You might not hear the names like you're used to hearing, especially on the D-line, which they are banged up. But this is a team that is too deep, that is full of monsters.
Well, I get that.
Especially on defense. So there's a reason Georgia's favored in this football game.
Oh, I understand. I'm not saying Georgia can't win the game. They may go out and hit 15 explosive plays. Who the hell knows? When you recruit your ass off at the level they have for so long, nobody has bad players. I just, again, and going back to that Kentucky game, I don't go back 3 years. I think it's different. Every year is different. Every circumstance is different. And it's not just the Kentucky game. I have not seen Georgia's offense this whole season pretty much against anybody that can walk on two legs and think at the same time, be able to hit a bunch of explosive plays like they're going to need to beat Bama, to beat Texas, to beat Ole Miss. Now, they might. But so far, I haven't seen it, and that includes at Kentucky. So I know Georgia has really good players. Nobody's doubting that. But Oscar Delp is not Brock Bowers. Dominic Lovett is not Ladd McConkey. I have not seen that guy or those guys that can say, you know what? We can catch the ball at 10 yards on the dig, break a tackle, and go score. I haven't seen him hit really huge chunk plays on the ground either. With ETN coming over and what they've had in the backfield. I know he was out against Clemson, but I don't think it's a crazy thing to say to look at how Georgia's played and say, who are the guy that's going to make the big plays in this game? And they might, but we haven't seen it yet.
And keep in mind, explosive plays can be made on defense as well. And I guarantee you in that defensive meeting room all week, and special teams, but that defensive meeting room in particular this week is saying, guys, we can turn Jalen Milroe over. Let's turn him over multiple times. Texas did it at Tuscaloosa a year ago. Now, Jalen Milroe's a lot different quarterback than he was early in the season last year when Texas came to town. But I know that they're saying we can turn him over. And if we turn him over, especially multiple times, whether that's a strip sack fumble, whether that's an interception, maybe even a pick six, take it to the house, we're going to give our offense a much better chance to win this football game.
It's going to be fascinating. We want to know what y'all think. All right. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Again, without you, there is no us. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please keep hitting like on those videos and leave a comment. Whether you agree or disagree, hopefully it's a little bit of both. That's what makes this fun and not boring.